I headed to the airport with my daughter-in-law and grandson to greet my son, who was coming back after a year of working abroad. Out of nowhere, a security guard approached me and asked, "Ma'am, where's the woman who was with you?" I was caught off guard. "You mean my daughter-in-law? She just went to the restroom." Then, through the guard's radio, a cold voice said, "She just ran out toward the exit. Team G, surround her." I froze, confused about what was happening, and quickly tried to call her, but she didn't pick up. Her phone was off. 15 minutes later, chaos erupted in the international arrivals area. But before I dive into that, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far our revenge stories go. The noise of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport surrounded me, but all I could think about was the announcement that the flight from London had landed. I had been there with my daughter-in-law, Nia, and my grandson, Galani, for almost an hour, waiting patiently under the massive electronic board. Finally, the line I'd been waiting for lit up in green. Landed. Exactly a year had passed since I said goodbye to Kwesi, my son, as he left for his overseas job. Standing in that airport, I felt joy mixed with nerves. I squeezed Jelani's small hand tightly, and he looked up at me with those big, excited eyes. "Mama Odora, I'm going to the restroom for a moment," Nia said suddenly, her tone hurried. I nodded, my focus already on the international arrivals gate where my son would soon walk out. I smiled to myself, completely forgetting that Nia had walked away. About 5 minutes later, a man in a security uniform approached me. He looked different from the usual patrol officers, more formal, with a sharp gaze, like he was on a serious mission. He scanned the area before lowering his voice and asking, "Ma'am, where's the woman who was with you?" I was taken aback and instinctively pointed toward the restroom. "You mean my daughter-in-law? She just went in there." As soon as I spoke, static came from the radio on his shoulder, and another voice cut through the noise. "She just ran out toward Gate G. Close off the perimeter." The officer's expression shifted from curiosity to tension. He nodded, looking at me with suspicion. A chill ran down my spine. What was going on? My hands trembling, I dialed Nia's number, but it went straight to voicemail as if her phone had been turned off. My heart raced. From different parts of the terminal, dozens of armed men with badges spread out through the waiting area. Passengers started to notice something was off. Murmurs filled the air, and some backed away in fear, while others pulled out their phones to record. I hugged Galani close, who was now scared, and buried his face in my chest. Then, amidst all that chaos, my son appeared. Kwesi walked out through the arrivals gate, looking a bit thinner and tanned, but his smile was just like I remembered. He pushed a luggage cart full of suitcases while holding a small gift bag in the other hand. His eyes scanned the crowd eagerly. When he spotted me, his smile grew even bigger. He waved and began walking quickly toward us, leaving the cart behind. "Mama Jelani." But just as he was about 15 feet away, two people lunged at him from the sides. "Are you Quai Vance?" a cold voice asked. Kwesi froze, his smile vanishing. He nodded, bewildered. "Yes, that's me. What's happening?" The sound of handcuffs clicking echoed ominously as they locked around his wrists. The gift bag dropped, its contents scattering everywhere. The crowd fell silent. "What are you doing?" I screamed, my mind racing. I grabbed Jelani, who was now crying loudly, and rushed toward my son. "Let my son go. You've got the wrong man." Kwesi was beside himself, trying to pull away in vain, his face twisted in fear. Why? What did I do wrong? A burly officer blocked my path, his arm like an iron clamp. His voice was flat and emotionless. "Mrs. Vance, calm down. He's been arrested for being linked to an international fraud ring. Please accompany us to the station to provide a statement." My ears were ringing. The world that moments ago was filled with joy had crumbled completely. I could only watch as they took my son away, hands cuffed behind his back, amidst camera flashes and the curious stares of everyone in the airport. They didn't take me straight to an interrogation room. Instead, I was led with Galani to a small, sterile waiting room, likely reserved for special cases. Jelani was still sobbing in my arms, trembling uncontrollably. I had to be strong for him. With shaking hands, I dialed my cousin Vera's number in Atlanta. My voice cracked. Vera, come to the airport right now. Go to the international terminal and ask for the security office. Take Jelani. Quasi, I couldn't finish the sentence. My throat closed up. The police had taken him into custody. Vera arrived like a gust of wind, looking pale. She didn't ask many questions, just nodded and reached for Jelani. My heart felt like it was being ripped apart as I pried my grandson's little fingers from my clothes. "Grandma," he sobbed, "where are Daddy and Mommy?" He clung to me tightly, not wanting to let go. Eventually, Vera had to carry him, his cries echoing down the hallway. "Grandma, Daddy, Mommy," until their silhouettes disappeared behind the automatic doors. I was left alone in a terrifying silence. The ride to the police station was filled with a heavy quiet. The car drove down a long, cold hallway illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights. The smell of disinfectant and old paper hit my nose. I sat on a hard plastic chair right outside the interrogation room, staring at the closed, gray steel door that held my son and the truth. A young female officer brought me a cup of water, her eyes filled with compassion. I nodded in thanks, my frozen hand gripping the plastic cup, but I couldn't drink. My throat was dry, though it wasn't thirst for water, but for the truth. To keep myself from going crazy as I waited, I forced myself to think back to everything, to reconstruct the events from the beginning. I'm Odora Vance, a retired literature teacher. My husband passed away 10 years ago, leaving my world to shrink to Kwesi and my grandson, Jelani. Kwesi is a good man, a talented carpenter, but too trusting. And then there's Nia, my daughter-in-law. I remember the day Kwesi, beaming, told us he had an opportunity to work for a big furniture company in London. Nia supported him wholeheartedly, wrapping her arms around his neck, her eyes shining with pride. "It's the best opportunity for him, Mama Odora. Don't worry, I'll take care of you and Jelani." And for over a year, she kept that promise. Nia was an amazing daughter-in-law, taking care of me and looking after Jelani at every meal and bedtime. Her artisan crafts business was thriving. She was the pride of our family. But now, sitting in this cold chair, all those little memories I once dismissed as insignificant surged back, sharp and terrifying. On those sleepless nights typical of old age, I would hear the soft sliding of the glass balcony door as Nia stepped outside, talking on the phone with someone, her voice barely audible. Once, a gust of wind blew my bedroom door open, and I caught a few stray words that didn't sound like business talk. "Package clean." At the time, I brushed it off, thinking they were just terms I didn't understand. Then new items started appearing. A designer handbag that cost the same as my monthly pension, expensive sunglasses, a top-of-the-line phone. Every time I asked, Nia would smile that radiant smile that erased all doubt. "It's a bonus the company gave me for finishing a special project, Mama. You deserve it." Those words now sent chills down my spine, and then the clearest, most painful memory washed over me like a tidal wave. It was an autumn afternoon about 3 months ago. I was watering my geraniums in the hallway next to Nia's home office when I overheard her on the phone. A cold, calculating voice I'd never heard from her before said, "No, you can't use my account. It's too risky. Use Quasi's. He's in London. He won't find out. The money will look cleaner that way." That word "cleaner" lodged like a dagger in my gut. I almost knocked on the door to demand an explanation, but my usual cowardice held me back. I told myself, it's probably something about work, taxes, or something I don't understand. I shouldn't be suspicious without reason. I stood up suddenly in the plastic chair, the ticking of the hallway clock relentless. The interrogation room door remained shut, silent as a grave, trapping my son and the truth inside. Remorse and unbearable fear squeezed my chest until I could hardly breathe. It's not that I didn't know. I just chose not to see. I covered my eyes and ears to all the signs, wanting to maintain the facade of a happy family, and now my son was paying the price for my cowardice. Nearly 3 hours passed, and I was still sitting there, numb. Then a sharp click broke the silence. The gray door of the interrogation room swung open, but the person who stepped out wasn't my son. It was a man in his 50s, dressed in an elegant suit, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed. He had a commanding presence, the authority of someone used to handling dark secrets. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice deep and calm. I nodded mechanically. "I'm Detective Thorne, the lead investigator on this case." He led me to a small office nearby. The room was tidy, with a window overlooking a gray courtyard. On the dark wood desk sat a thick file. The cover bore a white label with two words, Kwesi Vance. My heart sank. Detective Thorne wasted no time. He opened the file and turned it toward me. The first page was a diagram filled with lines, boxes, and numbers, resembling a giant spider web. Mrs. Vance, he began, pointing to a box in the center with my son's name. In the last 14 months, the bank account in your son's name, Kwesi Vance, has received over $2 million from 47 different accounts across the United States and Europe. $2 million. That number hit me like a lightning bolt. I shook my head, mouth agape but unable to speak. He flipped to the next page, where a list of transactions appeared. That money, he continued flatly, was transferred almost immediately to accounts in Panama and the Cayman Islands. It's a classic money laundering process, ma'am. Very professional. It can't be, I finally managed to say. I stood up abruptly, leaning on the table to keep from collapsing. My voice trembled with indignation. My son is a carpenter. He only knows how to work with wood. He doesn't know how to handle money or banking apps. There's been a mistake. Detective Thorne looked at me with a flicker of compassion in his eyes, but his voice remained firm. We're sorry, ma'am, but all the evidence points in one direction. He turned the page to show me a scanned copy of a business account opening contract. This signature, he said, pointing to the bottom line, is your son's, isn't it? It was Kwesi's signature. I slumped back into the chair, feeling hollow inside. Please let me see him, just 5 minutes. I need to hear it from him. Detective Thorne hesitated, looking into my desperate eyes. Then he sighed and nodded. They took me to another area of the building, crossing hallways with cold bars. The sound of officers' footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Kwesi was sitting in a small empty room. There was only a metal table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs, no windows. He wasn't handcuffed, but an officer guarded the door, blocking the glass window. When I entered, Kwesi looked up, his face pale, drained of color, his eyes red and swollen. The clothes he wore at the airport, chosen with excitement for his family reunion, were now wrinkled and disheveled. I sat across from him, trembling, and took his cold hands. Kwesi, I whispered, what happened? Tell me the truth. He looked at me, tears welling in his eyes. Nia, he finally said. It was Nia. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. She said she needed to open a business account to import materials for her new business. I didn't get it. The day before I flew to London, she met me at a coffee shop, handed me a bunch of papers, and rushed me. Sign quickly, baby. The lawyer's waiting. It has to be ready today for the merchandise to arrive on time. I glanced at the documents, saw the company name, but it was all legal jargon I didn't understand. I trusted her, Mama. I thought I was helping her fulfill her dream. He rested his head on the metal table, shoulders shaking. I signed without really reading anything. Where she pointed, I signed. A cruel truth hit me hard. My son, out of love and blind trust, had become a scapegoat for his own wife. Just then, the door burst open. Detective Thorne entered with an expressionless face. Time's up, ma'am. He glanced at Kwesi, who was slumped over, then looked back at me. We just got an update. The woman who was with you at the airport, Nia Imani Vance, has been confirmed as the mastermind of this ring in the southeast region. She had her escape plan since before we detected her. He paused, delivering the final blow. All transactions, all illicit money passed through accounts in your son's name, with the mastermind now legally a fugitive. Kwesi Vance will be charged with money laundering and being an accomplice in an international fraud ring. A scapegoat. My son was the perfect scapegoat. An officer entered and gently helped Kwesi to his feet. He didn't resist, walking like a shadow. As he reached the door, he turned and looked at me one last time. His eyes revealed no anger, only despair. I left the police station as the sky began to darken. The world continued as usual. Cars rushed by, people walked on, but my world had shattered. The next morning, I sought a lawyer, my only hope. I visited Mr. Sterling, a middle-aged attorney known for his good heart, recommended by a friend. He listened patiently, but when I handed him the summary of charges Detective Thorne had allowed me to photocopy, his kind smile faded. He read it repeatedly, then leaned back in his chair, hands interlaced. Mrs. Vance, he said politely but distantly, I'm sorry for what your family is going through, but this case is too complicated. The evidence is overwhelming. Your son's signature is everywhere. defending him will be nearly impossible. He kindly declined to take the case, claiming he had too many pending ones. I left his office feeling like ice water had been dumped on me, but I didn't give up. I visited another firm, then a third. The responses were the same. They looked at me with sympathy, shaking their heads as they glanced at the thick file. A young lawyer, perhaps inexperienced, was brutally honest. "Mrs. Vance, your son is the perfect scapegoat. No jury will believe a grown man signed so many documents without reading them. Taking this case will only cost you money and tarnish my record." By the end of the day, I returned home in a state of hopelessness. The heavy iron door opened, and all that greeted me was an eerie silence. The house that Naya and I had built together now felt strange and cold. On the coffee table, the cardboard sign Jelani had painstakingly made the day before still lay there, reading, "Welcome home, Daddy," a bitter reminder of our tragedy. I collapsed onto the sofa, staring at the list of law firms in my notebook, all crossed out with furious ink strokes. Hope had been extinguished. Just then, the doorbell rang. I didn't want to see anyone, but the ringing persisted, insistent. Reluctantly, I dragged myself to the door. A woman in her 40s stood there, dressed simply in jeans and a shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. But what struck me were her sharp, intelligent eyes filled with determination. "Mrs. Odora Vance?" she asked firmly. I nodded, still wondering who she was. "I'm Detective Zuri Banks," she introduced herself, showing her police badge. "I'm with the Cybercrimes Unit, and I've been tracking Nia for a while." Hearing Nia's name from a stranger startled me. I stepped back and invited her in. We sat in the living room near the welcome sign that felt like a curse. Zuri didn't get straight to the point like Detective Thorne. She asked me about Kwesi, what he liked to eat, his personality, how his carpentry was going. Those questions felt genuine, like she wanted to know the real Kwesi. After a while, seeing that I was calmer, she said, "Mrs. Vance, I read the case file. My experience tells me that the leaders of these organizations never get their hands dirty. They always choose someone with a clean record, someone trusting, and most importantly, someone with little financial knowledge to use as a front. Your son fits that description perfectly." She held my gaze, wanting to instill confidence. "I believe Kwesi is innocent, but a cop's belief doesn't hold much weight in court. We need proof. Concrete proof." For the first time in days, a fragile spark of hope flickered within me. But what can we do? Naya fled. She erased all traces. Zuri's confidence was unwavering. People like her think they're smarter than everyone else, that they've deleted everything. But they often leave small mistakes where they feel safest, right here in this house. She glanced around the living room with the analytical eyes of an investigator. "I can't ask for an official search warrant because we don't have enough legal grounds. All the superficial evidence is against your son." But she turned to me. "With your permission, we can investigate on our own. Cooperate with me, ma'am, for justice for Kwesi." Justice for Kwesi. Those words coursed through my exhausted body like electricity. I nodded eagerly. "What do you want me to do?" Zuri's gaze shifted to the hallway leading to the bedrooms and the study at the back of the house. During her time here, was there a place Nia considered her territory? A space you didn't usually enter? I didn't hesitate. Her home office. She always kept the door locked, claiming she needed absolute silence to create. Zuri nodded, a faint smile creeping onto her lips. "Then we'll start there." I led her down the hallway. The oak door of the office loomed at the end of the corridor. Out of habit, I reached for the brass doorknob, but it was locked tight. "It's always like this," I whispered. Zuri didn't flinch. She set her bag down and pulled out a small leather kit with professional precision. Inside were shiny metal tools. She glanced at my surprised face and smiled slightly. "It's an extra skill every investigator should have. Sometimes justice is behind a closed door." She knelt and began working swiftly and silently. Only the soft clicks of metal could be heard. I held my breath, my heart pounding. Less than a minute later, a soft click echoed through the air. The door creaked open. Zuri pushed it and stepped inside, and I followed. A breath of cold air filled the room, smelling of new paper and expensive air freshener. The office was meticulously organized, the walnut desk spotless, the laptop closed with precision, books aligned by spine color like a drained rainbow. That clinical order felt jarring against the chaos of my life and sent chills down my spine. Zuri put on rubber gloves and handed me a pair. Mrs. Vance, you live here. You know better than I do how Nia organized everything. Look for anything out of place, any object that doesn't fit. We began searching in silence. I checked the shelves, hoping to find something tucked away, but there was nothing except art and business books. Zuri focused on the desk, opening each drawer methodically. The first was filled with luxury office supplies, gold-plated pens and notepads with Nia's logo. The second contained contracts and legal documents, a perfect facade of a successful businesswoman. I moved to the white painted steel filing cabinet in the corner and pulled open the top drawer. It was empty except for several leather-bound photo albums. Curiosity piqued. I opened one. A cold pang shot through my heart. They were photos of Kwesi and Nia's wedding, my son's radiant smile next to the woman who had sent him to prison. On the next page, there was a picture of Jelani as a newborn in his mother's arms. Nia had kept those memories carefully, as if she were truly part of our family. Or maybe it was just another fragment of her perfect facade. Come look at this, Zuri called, checking the bottom drawer of the desk. It was almost empty, containing only a few paper clips, but she was tapping the bottom gently with her fingers. The sound was deeper than in other areas. Something wasn't right. Zuri pulled out a tool thin as a box cutter and deftly slid it along the edge of the pressed wood bottom. Lifting it carefully revealed a secret compartment underneath. Inside was a small black velvet bag. Zuri lifted it and poured out its contents. My heart stopped. Each object that fell into the light felt like a piece of a nightmare. 5 cheap mobile phones, the kind that only make calls, and dozens of SIM cards wrapped in small Ziploc bags, labeled with country names in Nia's neat handwriting. There were also 2 identical black leather notebooks. My gloved hand trembled as I picked one up and opened it. Inside were lines of names written in delicate, perfectly ordered calligraphy. Elsa Schmidt, 81, Germany. Jean-Pierre Logan, 79, France. Maria Rossi, 85, Italy. Next to each name was a long series of numbers. Zuri looked over my shoulder, her voice hardened with rage. Here's the list of victims. Most are elderly people, alone. Those numbers must be bank accounts or the amounts they stole. Just then, as Zuri picked up the second notebook, a thick envelope fell out from between the pages. I bent down to pick it up. It wasn't sealed. I pulled out a stack of photos. They weren't family pictures. They showed Nia in elegant clothes, sitting in 5-star hotel meeting rooms with suspicious-looking foreign men. She was toasting, shaking hands, smiling. I flipped to one photo and froze. Nia was next to a tall man in a black suit with a long, ugly scar on his right cheek. I recognized that face from the news months ago. He was an international fraudster wanted by the FBI. Zuri took the photo from my trembling hand, examining the scar carefully. This doesn't just prove she's involved, she said gravely. It shows Nia isn't just any scammer. She's a key player in this organization. Detective Zuri carefully stored everything we found in a sealed police bag. I have to take this to the lab immediately, she said, her voice urgent but controlled. My team will analyze the data from the phones and SIMs. It'll take some time, but we'll find something. Stay here and act normally. Don't speak of this to anyone, not even your closest loved ones. Your safety is the priority. She left as quickly as she arrived, leaving me alone in Nia's office. I felt both disgust and relief. Disgust at the two-faced daughter-in-law I once loved. Relief because we finally had something to fight with. I began to tidy up, trying to restore everything to its original place. I replaced the drawer bottom and aligned the books on the shelf, my hand brushing over the expensive items bought with money stolen from the elderly. Nausea rose in my throat. After finishing, I stepped out to the porch for some fresh air, hoping to shake off the false smell of the room. The evening light was soft, but it couldn't warm the frozen soul I carried inside. Just then, I noticed Mrs. Opaline Chesterton, my neighbor of over 20 years, watering her pots in front of her porch. She put down the watering can and approached with concern. "Oh, Lord, have mercy. I finally found you. I heard the neighbors talking. What happened to Kwesi? This morning I saw a police car in front of your house." Seeing her kind face and sincere concern broke down the emotional wall I'd been trying to build. Tears streamed down my cheeks, tears of helplessness, fear, and unbearable rage. I told her everything, that Kwesi had been arrested unjustly on absurd charges. I omitted the details of Detective Zuri's secret investigation. Mrs. Opaline listened attentively, her thin hands patting my back softly. After I finished, she stared into the void for a moment, then grabbed my hand and leaned closer, lowering her voice as if someone might overhear. Odora, listen to me. I have something to tell you that might help. About 2 weeks ago, one night when I couldn't sleep, I went out to the porch for air. I saw Nia standing by the gate talking to a strange man. He was tall, and I remember well, he had a long scar on his cheek. My heart raced. That was the man with the scar from the photo. Mrs. Opaline continued. They were speaking quietly, but since it was early morning and everything was silent, I caught a few words. I saw Nia give him a thick envelope and say, "The package for Frankfurt." He nodded and said something that stuck with me. "The widow from Detroit is already clean." At the time, it seemed strange, but I'd forgotten it. Now it clicked. "The widow from Detroit. Clean," I murmured. That was a code, without a doubt. The widow was likely a victim, and clean probably meant the scam was completed. I suddenly felt a rush of hope. There was a witness who could confirm Naya's ties to the fugitive criminal. That was the key piece to demolishing the defense that Kwesi acted alone. "Mrs. Opaline," I squeezed her hand tightly, my voice shaking with emotion. "Could you come with me to the precinct? Your testimony is crucial. You could save Kwesi." She didn't hesitate. "Of course, honey, for Kwesi. I love him like a grandson." I dashed into the house for my car keys. Mrs. Opaline sat in the passenger seat as we drove away from our familiar street. I called Zuri to share the good news, but she didn't answer. Maybe she was busy in the lab. I decided to head straight to the precinct. As we took the main avenue, a white truck with no markings suddenly shot out from a side street, blinding me with its lights. I heard Mrs. Opaline scream beside me before a horrific crash shattered everything. When I regained consciousness, the strong smell of disinfectant filled my nose. I tried to open my eyes, but the bright hospital lights hurt. I was lying in a bed with an IV in my arm. Zuri stood next to me, her face tense. "You're awake?" she said gravely. "You only have a mild concussion and some bruises." "Will Mrs. Opaline be okay?" I asked, my throat dry. Every word hurt. Zuri hesitated for a moment, a pause that felt like an eternity. She avoided my gaze. "The woman who was with you didn't survive. We're very sorry. The truck fled the scene. We're searching for it." My world collapsed again. I burst into tears. Tears of fear, pain for losing such a good neighbor, and unbearable rage. Between sobs, I told Zuri what Mrs. Opaline had revealed about the man with the scar, the package, and the widow from Detroit. Zuri placed a firm hand on my shoulder, offering strength with that simple gesture. "Mrs. Vance, do you understand now? They don't just scam. They're willing to kill to silence those who know too much. This fight is no longer just for your son." In that moment, I knew she was right. The fear I felt morphed into determination. I wasn't going to give up. I would fight for Kwesi and for Mrs. Opaline, the brave neighbor who paid too high a price for speaking the truth. The next 2 days in the hospital felt like an eternity. The physical pain from my bruises and dizziness paled compared to the mental torment. Zuri visited often, not just to update me on the investigation, but to ensure my safety. A plainclothes officer stood watch at my door day and night. His presence made me feel secure, but also reminded me that danger loomed close. In moments of solitude, guilt overwhelmed me. If I hadn't taken Mrs. Opaline with me, if we had been more cautious, if I had called a taxi instead of driving myself, thousands of ifs swirled in my mind. During one of her visits, seeing me unresponsive, Zuri placed her hand on my shoulder. "Mrs. Vance, don't blame yourself anymore. They were already after her. Maybe they saw her talking to you. Maybe they were watching the house. Sooner or later, they would have acted. The fault isn't yours. It belongs to those bastards." Mrs. Opaline's funeral took place while I was still in the hospital. Her son, a middle-aged man living in another city, called to thank me for being with his mother during her final moments. I asked Vera to order a large wreath of flowers, and on the black ribbon I wrote, "For a brave neighbor, justice will be done." It wasn't just a promise to Mrs. Opaline, it was an oath to myself. The day I was discharged, Zuri came to pick me up. As we drove home, she shared some good news. "We found the truck," she said, her eyes focused on the road. "The driver rented it with fake documents, but he made a stupid mistake. He paid with a credit card. Even though it was fake, the transaction left a digital trail we couldn't ignore." Zuri explained that her cybercrimes team had traced the trail to a shady internet cafe in a working class area outside Atlanta. Thanks to security cameras, they got a clear image of the suspect making the online transaction. "And that face," she said, a tone of satisfaction in her voice, "matches perfectly with a profile in the FBI database. His real name is Darius Scar Mitchell. He's a thug working for criminal organizations with a record for assault and extortion. And do you know what else? His most distinctive feature is that long scar on his right cheek." Only hours after confirming his identity, the police raided a cheap motel where Darius was hiding. He offered no resistance, as if he'd known the day would come. Zuri took me home, made sure everything was all right, then returned to the precinct to oversee the interrogation. That night, she called to update me. At first, Darius was like a stone, repeating, "It was a traffic accident." I got scared and ran. He insisted he didn't know who Nia was or anything about a criminal ring. He played the scared truck driver to perfection. They interrogated him for 24 hours straight, using various tactics, but nothing worked. Finally, Zuri decided to try something different. Instead of entering as an officer, she brought in photos. She'd printed pictures of the victims from Nia's notebook, elderly, kind people smiling with their families. She placed them on the table in front of Darius, speaking softly but with sharp words. "This is Mrs. Schmidt, 82, from Berlin. All her retirement money vanished. She had to sell her home and move to a nursing home." She pushed another photo forward. "This is Mr. Dubois, 78, from France. After realizing he'd lost everything to scammers, he took his own life." Zuri placed a picture of Mrs. Opaline on the table. "And this is Mrs. Opaline Chesterton, 65, a kind neighbor. You killed her just for overhearing a conversation she shouldn't have. She had 3 grandchildren waiting for her at home." Finally, Zuri locked eyes with him, her voice icy. "If you cooperate and give up the mastermind, you'll only face charges for vehicular manslaughter and could get a reduced sentence. If not, we'll ensure you bear full responsibility for Mrs. Opaline's death, alongside a long list of fraud charges. You'll die in prison, Darius." The stone began to crack. Darius lowered his head in silence, the ticking clock in the interrogation room deafening. Finally, he looked up and began to speak. He confessed he'd been hired by Nia. He was the man with the scar Mrs. Opaline had seen. Initially, they ordered him to scare her, maybe break into her house or damage her car. But when he saw us rushing to the precinct, he got scared and called Nia. The order was to act more aggressively. Then he revealed a crucial piece of information. Nia has something she calls insurance, an external hard drive. Everything is on it, a complete list of victims, recordings of scam calls, money transfer schemes, and meetings of the entire ring where the leaders' voices are heard. She said if anything happened to her, it would be published automatically. "Where's that hard drive?" Zuri asked insistently. Darius shook his head. "I don't know, but she never separated from it. It was her life." Immediately, Zuri's team sprang into action. They analyzed Darius's last calls, most irrelevant, but some unregistered numbers had been in frequent contact. Following the weak signal of one of those numbers, they tracked her last location to a secluded cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains, an hour north of the city. A heavily armed SWAT team was dispatched. Zuri called me at dawn. "Mrs. Vance, we found her. Come. You deserve to witness this." She sent a car for me. We didn't go straight to the cabin, but stopped at a mobile command center. A large van equipped with cutting-edge technology parked a few blocks from the target, hidden behind trees. The atmosphere was tense. Technicians were glued to monitors. Only the clicking of keys and brief conversations could be heard. Zuri handed me headphones. "We've intercepted the cell signal inside the house. Listen." I put them on with trembling hands. After a few seconds of static, Nia's familiar voice came through. "Yes, they arrested Darius, an idiot. He thought he was tough, but turned out soft. But it doesn't matter. Everything is in my husband's name, Kwesi. He's a lovesick fool. A few fake tears are enough, and he believes everything. Now he's in prison for me, taking the fall for all the crimes. Let the police search the state. They won't find me." That phrase, a lovesick fool, stabbed straight into my heart. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my skin as rage consumed me. This woman had destroyed my son's life and trampled on his love and trust in the cruelest way. Zuri noticed the fire in my eyes and nodded silently to the SWAT team leader nearby. Through the radio, the cold, determined order came. All units, move in. On the main screen, a drone image of the house appeared. I watched as shadows in tactical gear moved swiftly, surrounding the cabin like ghosts of justice. They battered down the front door, and Nia's desperate screams echoed. The chaos unfolded in under a minute, efficient and swift. The commander reported, "Target secured, external hard drive and several mobile phones found. Zone secure." They brought Nia out, hands cuffed behind her back. She no longer had that air of superiority. Her hair was a mess, her clothes disheveled. As she passed the command vehicle, her eyes met mine for a brief moment. Surprise flickered, then fierce hatred filled her gaze. The police took her away, disappearing into the darkness. Hours later, with irrefutable evidence from the hard drive and recordings of her confession, Kwesi's release order was signed. I went to the detention center to pick him up. When the heavy old door opened with a screech, Kwesi stepped out. A few days in prison had taken a toll. He looked thinner, gaunt, with an unkempt beard and deep circles under his eyes. But his expression had shifted from hopelessness to something else. He didn't say a word, just walked quickly toward me and hugged me tightly. I felt his shoulders shake. I hugged him back, stroking his back like when he was a child. On the way home, he finally spoke, voice hoarse from days of silence. "I can't believe it, Mama. The person I loved most, the mother of my son, could do this to me. How could I have been so blind?" When we arrived, Vera had brought Galani. The boy sat on the sofa with a sad look, but when he saw Kwesi, his eyes lit up. "Daddy!" he shouted, running like an arrow into his father's open arms. Kwesi knelt, hugging Jelani tightly and burying his face in the boy's soft head. In that moment, I knew my worst nightmare was over, but I also understood my son had changed forever. The scar on his heart wouldn't fully heal. He looked at me, determination shining in his eyes. "It's over. I'm getting a divorce. I'm fighting for full custody of Galani. I won't let him grow up with a mother like that." A few weeks later, on the day of the first trial, the Atlanta sky was gray. Kwesi, Zuri, and I sat in the front row reserved for witnesses. Kwesi wore a formal suit, but his face was still gaunt. He sat upright, gaze fixed ahead, unwavering. The courtroom was spacious, solemn, with old oak benches and the national seal hanging behind the judge. The atmosphere buzzed with tension as journalists filled the back, their cameras like black cannons aimed at the dock. The transnational fraud case with murder implications had shaken the country, and Nia was at the center of it all. The side door opened, and two officers escorted Nia in. She wore a loose gray prisoner uniform, looking thinner and paler. Her once shiny hair was hastily pulled back, revealing a discolored forehead. She walked with her eyes glued to the floor, not daring to look at us once. I was called as the first witness. When I stood, all eyes turned to me. Taking a deep breath, I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with a firm voice, began asking about my daily life with Nia, about the signs I had overlooked. I shared everything, from the secret calls at night, the expensive luxury items, to her fatal comment about using Kwesi's account so the money would look cleaner. When I recounted how, with Detective Zuri, we found the small black velvet bag and the notebooks with the names of elderly victims, the room fell silent. I felt indignation swell in the air. Nia's defense attorney, a sly man, tried to insinuate that I was prejudiced against my daughter-in-law to undermine my testimony. "Mrs. Vance," he asked suggestively, "isn't it true you never really accepted your daughter-in-law, a young, successful, independent woman, and this testimony is just an exaggerated interpretation of a mother wanting to protect her son at all costs?" I looked him straight in the eye, my voice steady. "I loved Naya like a daughter. I was proud of her, but I couldn't have imagined the dozens of SIM cards or the list of elderly people who were scammed until they had nothing left. And certainly, I couldn't have fabricated the photos of her next to internationally wanted criminals." Murmurs spread through the room, and the lawyer fell silent, no longer asking questions. In the following days, the evidence from the hard drive was presented, a series of devastating blows that were impossible to deny. Recordings played in the courtroom, Nia's arrogant voice betraying her and her accomplices. Then it was Nia's turn. She stood, her fragile figure commanding attention. Everyone expected her to deny everything, to blame circumstances, but instead, she confessed. Her voice was monotone, as if reading a report about someone else's life. She recounted how 2 years ago, after failing at a cryptocurrency investment, she had been left with a massive debt to loan sharks. They threatened not just her, but also Kwesi and Jelani. She then revealed how a partner approached her, promising to pay the debt and provide a comfortable life if she participated in their project. At first, she thought she would only help with minor transactions. Then she detailed how they targeted lonely elderly people on social media, creating fake sweepstakes websites and fictitious customer service centers. When victims called, they asked for bank OTP codes to confirm the prize, and as soon as they got it, their accounts were emptied in seconds. When the prosecutor asked her final question, "Why did you choose your own husband, Kwesi Vance, as a scapegoat?" Nia finally turned her head, her gaze empty, devoid of regret. "Because I needed a perfect replacement," she said coldly. "Someone with a clean record, no criminal background, someone living abroad to complicate tracking, and most importantly, someone who fully trusted me, willing to sign anything I gave him. Kwesi had all that." Kwesi, sitting next to me, clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white. I gently placed my hand over his in a comforting gesture. After several days of trial, the court delivered its verdict. The judge faced Nia, reading the sentence with a voice that echoed in the solemn room. Nia Amani Vance is sentenced to 25 years in prison for multiple charges: leading a structured fraud organization, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and complicity in the involuntary manslaughter of Mrs. Opaline Chesterton. Darius Mitchell, for cooperating with authorities, received a sentence of 10 years. Other accomplices received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. Justice, though delayed, had finally been served. As the police took Nia away, she passed in front of us. Kwesi stood up, their eyes meeting for a fleeting moment. In her gaze was a terrifying emptiness. In his, there was no longer love or pain, only a cold, firm resolve. The door to the past closed forever. We left the court, and the sun broke through the gray sky, forcing me to squint. The storm had finally passed. A few months after the trial, we sold the house in Atlanta. We couldn't live there anymore. Every corner was filled with memories of false happiness and real pain. Naya's office felt like a scar in the house, and the living room reminded me of Kwesi's arrest. That house had died for us. We moved to a small coastal town in the Carolinas, a place where the salty air and the sound of waves could soothe any soul. We bought a little white house with sky blue window frames, and most importantly, a small garden filled with hydrangeas and lavender. Kwesi processed the divorce quickly. Nia didn't appeal or ask for custody from prison. She'd severed ties with the world she left, sinking into the darkness she'd created. My son obtained full custody of Jelani. With the money from selling the house and part of my savings, I fulfilled a long-held dream of opening a small bakery, which I named Serenity Sweets. After all the storms, serenity was what we craved most. Every morning I woke up before dawn while the town still slept. The smell of flour, butter, cinnamon, and melted chocolate filled my small kitchen. Measuring, kneading, shaping, and waiting for the breads and pastries became therapy for my soul. I found calm in each repetitive movement and joy in creating sweets that brought happiness to others. Serenity Sweets quickly became the go-to spot for locals, from fishermen grabbing a hot glazed twist before heading out to sea to kids running in after school for a chocolate chip cookie. Kwesi also started anew. He didn't return to London. The wounds in his heart made him want to be close to family. He found work at a small interior design workshop in town. He didn't earn as much as before, but he gained something far more valuable: time. Every afternoon at 4:30, he left work to pick up Jelani from school. I often saw them walking along the beach, holding hands, building sandcastles, and then watching the waves wash them away. At night, after dinner, he patiently read stories of brave knights and kind princesses to Jelani, fulfilling both father and mother roles with love and tenderness. Sometimes during quiet moments, Jelani would still ask about his mom. His innocent questions broke my heart. Grandma, where's my mommy? Why doesn't she come back to Daddy and me? Quasi never lied to him. He hugged him tight and replied softly, Mommy made a mistake, son. She's in a faraway place trying to fix it. But never forget she loves you very much. One Sunday, as I placed freshly baked sweet potato pies on the shelf, a family car pulled up in front of the bakery. Zuri stepped out. No longer in uniform, she wore a simple floral dress, looking relaxed and happy. Captain Banks, I smiled, joy bubbling up as I ran to hug her. After solving such a significant case, she'd been promoted. She brought a beautiful model of a pirate ship for Jelani. We sat in the small garden behind the bakery under a pergola covered in flowering vines, sipping coffee and enjoying pastries fresh from the oven. The press had called her a heroine, but when I mentioned it, Zuri just shook her head. The true heroine is you, Miss Odora, she said sincerely. If it weren't for your unwavering faith in your son, for your bravery in the face of danger, Kwesi might still be in prison, and Naya would still be out there hurting more people. As Zuri prepared to leave, Kwesi and Jelani returned from the beach, both with grains of sand in their hair and sun-kissed skin. Jelani ran to show Zuri a shiny shell he'd just found. Seeing that scene, witnessing the genuine smile on my son's face, a smile that was no longer forced, filled my soul with warmth and deep gratitude. That night, after closing the bakery, I lingered in the family kitchen, cleaning up the last of the baking utensils. Looking out the window toward the garden, I saw Kwesi pushing Jelani on the swing. The child's laughter mingled with the soft murmur of the distant sea and the lingering aroma of baked goods. I once believed that living with righteousness and trusting those we love was enough to protect them. But tragedy taught me a bitter lesson. Sometimes blind trust becomes a trap that can ruin our future. I chose silence over suspicion, preferring to keep the peace rather than seek the truth. The price I paid was nearly losing my son to the wrong person. Now I understand that justice doesn't always arrive on its own, and the truth doesn't reveal itself without effort. We must seek it out with courage, even if it means facing the darkest shadows. Did you enjoy the story? Where are you listening from? Let's chat in the comments. If you liked it, consider sending a super thanks to support more stories like this. Thank you for your kindness. I'm looking forward to your comments. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel, so don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.